Wedding costs are on the rise post-COVID, and every single day as an Italian wedding planner, I'm asked what a wedding in Italy costs. Today in this episode, I'm going to break down what it costs to get married in Italy in 2023 and 2024. Ciao, I'm Lucy. I'm an Italian wedding planner and I'm the founder of Lista.com. I've planned over 200 Italian weddings and I'm here to give you honest, up-to-date advice on planning Italian weddings. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe below and you'll get our up-to-date videos every single week. This episode might be quite long because planning a budget out is quite a long process and I really want to get into the detail with you so you understand what things cost and why. Since COVID, suppliers and venues have been putting up their prices, and right now we're seeing a real increase across almost every supplier and venue out there. And this is because a lot of them haven't put their prices up for years, and then with 2 years of not really having much custom, they've had no choice but to put them up. They've also got much higher expenses now, so things like the cost of food, the cost of petrol, the overheads of electricity, gas. With all of these things going up, it's genuinely more expensive to run their businesses and to provide the services that they do. Sadly, this means that you do not get as much for your money as you used to in having an Italian wedding. Average prices have gone up. Every wedding is completely different, so there is no one average price for an Italian wedding. I'm going to try and take you through all the different costs that you might have in your wedding. Remember that your individual budget is based on what you actually want for your wedding, what your priorities are, the money that you have available, and the quality and types of suppliers that you're looking for. Every budget is completely unique. And one of the first things you should do before booking anything is to create a budget estimate. You need to know whether the wedding that you want to create is actually affordable to you before you take that first step and start booking things. You need to know that you can actually afford to do those things and then still have all of the other things within your wedding that you want. You can create a budget estimate by downloading the budget tracker from lalista.com. There's a template there ready and waiting for you with all the things that you might consider spending out on for your wedding. The Lalista website has a directory of suppliers and venues, and on here we've put prices of everything so you can get a really good idea of what things cost in real time. So you can go through, look at the different suppliers and actually populate your budget estimate. Okay, so let's get into it. What do things cost? So I'm going to go through a kind of generic budget based on a wedding that is, for example, in Tuscany and is a symbolic wedding with about 100 guests. So let's start with the biggest ticket items within your budget and the ones that have potentially the most influence on your wedding. The first one is the venue. You might rent a venue for a day, so we call that a day rental. Average cost for a day rental can be around 6,000 to 8,000 euro. So this is to come in the morning of the wedding, take over the location until about 1 a.m. and then clear it out. So if you have a day rental, obviously the cost to you is probably going to be quite high because you have to have that day cost within your budget. The other option is to have a venue that has accommodation. So really, quite commonly in Italian weddings, you would rent somewhere for 2 or 3 nights that a group of your guests can stay. And the normal kind of amount of people that will stay at a venue is between 20 and 30. Obviously, there are places that sleep less than that and many, many more than that. But for a venue that sleeps about 20 or 30, you could look anywhere between 5,000 euro for something that's like a farmhouse or an Airbnb type location, up to 30, 40,000 for a grand villa. We're seeing venues that used to be 20,000 for a week, now looking more like 30, 35,000 for a week. There's quite a lot of venues that have drastically gone up in price. Couples often choose to charge their guests to stay at these venues. So you might divide the cost of the venue by the number of days that you're staying there and the number of guests to get a price per person outcome. If that's too high to ask your guests, you could always subsidize this somewhat with your own money, and you should really get clear on how much it is that you want to charge your guests and what you think is appropriate before you book your wedding venue, so you know really what your budget is and what your guests are going to contribute and if you're going to add anything on top. And then you can kind of see what budget or what cost of venue is affordable for you. The second big ticket item is your catering. Now, if you've got 100 guests, for example, you might benefit from having a lower price per person for your catering. So the way that it works is every 10 people that you add to your guest list, so if you have 90 people and you go up to 100 people, your menu price falls by a certain amount. So at the moment we're seeing for 100 people, catering prices range anywhere from €85 for like lowest end of the catering spectrum when it comes to cost, not necessarily quality, up to €200-250 per person. I'd say the average for a 100-person wedding, price per person is around €120 at the moment, and different caterers include the bar within that cost or exclude the bar. So the €85-90 options generally exclude the bar, and you have a cost on top for the bar, which can be a flat cost of €2,000-4,000, or it can be a cost per person. Usually it's around €10 per person per hour. You should also always include a buffer for extras when it comes to catering. So on top of that price per person that you've allocated, there are other options that caterers give you to add things, like you might have seen a certain item of decor that you want that's not included in their cost. You may want to add extra hours of service. You may want to add a Prosecco tower, building of the wedding cake. All of these things come as extras. So it's a really good idea to have that kind of buffer within your budget. The third big ticket item is a wedding planner. Planners offer a range of services, and it's obviously totally up to you to work out how much support that you think you need. Prices of planners can range anything from €2,000 upwards. I'd say the average price of a planner these days is between €4,000 and €5,000, and that's for a full planning service by an expert planner. So now we're going to run through some of the other items that will fit within your budget. So the first one is photographer, and this is usually quite a high priority for couples. Photographers range from €1,500 up to €10,000. I'd say for a really good photographer that has the right experience and eye, you're probably looking at anywhere between €3,000 and €5,000. The same is with videographer. They are about the same price as a photographer. So depending on the style and quality that you want, the length of video that you're looking for, and the other extras that come with it, they can be anywhere from €3,000 to around €6,000. Hair and makeup. I always hear from couples that hair and makeup is much more than they expect it to be, and that it's expensive. Prices range from around €500 to €600 for a bride, so that's for hair and makeup on the wedding day, and then €100 to €150 per person for someone else having hair and makeup. So for example, a bridesmaid or a mum. Then there's music, and this is a really hard one to try and work out because everyone has such different tastes. So if, for example, you had PAs throughout the day and a DJ at the party, you could be looking at something like €1,000 to €1,500 for different types of DJ. You can get DJs that can be around €600 or €700. They tend to be slightly less experienced or professional, that they exist. If you wanted something like live music, so a string quartet for example, you can get a string duo through to a string quartet. Obviously less musicians will come with a lower cost, so you could say something like €800 or €900 for a duo, and then you could go up to almost €2,000 for a quartet. If you wanted something like a jazz trio or quartet, something fun to play at the aperitif, this can cost anywhere between €1,000 and €2,000. And if you're looking for a live band for the party, these can cost anything between €2,500 up to €10,000. So this really is where personal opinion and quality comes in. And if you're looking at bringing someone over from maybe the UK, flying them over, renting their equipment, that's definitely more in the 7 to 10k mark. You should also consider music tax, called the CI, which is something that is the law to have in Italy. It's €345 for a wedding, and it's around €200 for other events. So anywhere that you've got music, live or recorded, you need to have your CI tax paid. And finally, for the main wedding budget, the last things to consider are transport. So if you, for example, have 100 people at your wedding, 30 odd people are staying at the location, and you need to move around 50 or 60 people, you will probably need either one big bus or two smaller buses. Two smaller buses is likely because in Italy a lot of the roads aren't great and 50-seater buses often can't get to them. So for something like two 28-seater buses for the day, so to bring people to the wedding and to take them home in shuttles, very much dependent on where the wedding is, how many locations it has to pick up at, it can be around €800 per bus. It's also worth thinking about whether you want to put on transport at your other events as well. This is why I go on and on about choosing the venue and it being just such an important decision. Where you place your venue and how much accommodation surrounds it and how easy that accommodation is to get to can massively change those transport budget lines and hugely influence the cost of your wedding. Then there's the celebrant. If you're having a symbolic wedding, you may want to use a friend or family member, which would cost nothing, or you may want to use a professional celebrant, and these range from around 500 to 800 euro. And then there's the wet weather plan. So once again, choosing your venue is so important, getting the right one with the right wet weather plan. If you can find a venue that has a good wet weather option for 100 people, that's quite a miracle. There are some out there, they're not that easy to find. If you don't have an indoor space for your wedding, then you really need to put a tent option in your budget from the start. Planning a wedding, worrying about the weather from day one, so up to maybe 2 years, because you haven't got a plan B option, is just no fun for you. It's much more fun and realistic to have planned to have a tent as a backup option. So putting a deposit down on a tent, depending on the tent option and the size of the tent, can cost something like 2,000 euro. And then to pay for the tent in full, again, depending on all that criteria, could be between 4,000 and 6,000 in total. And finally, you need to think about the other events that you might have around your wedding. And this is the area that shocked me the most recently, just how much the price of these catering options has gone up. Now, you might have before had a pizza night where you paid 20 or 25 euros and this wonderful catering company come along and turn your wedding venue into a pizza restaurant. It's an amazing experience. This has gone up drastically. The price of a pizza night for 100 people is probably something like 40 to 50 euro per person now. Something like a barbecue or a pasta or a recovery brunch, these things that people used to have the day after their wedding, they're in a similar price range, probably more like 50 to 60 euro per person now. So I think these events around the wedding are going to become harder and harder to achieve for people with average budgets. There are other options that you can do. You know, you could just go for drinks informally the night before your wedding. The goal is to see everyone, not necessarily to feed them. And after the wedding, you could do something where family members potentially cook a breakfast for people, put on a brunch. You could have the shopping done for you for a barbecue through your venue. It just depends how much you want these events and how much time and energy you are willing to put into them. And the final area to think about is just generally how you will feed your guests over the duration of your stay. So some people will rent a location for 7 nights, for example, and you know you've got food for welcome event, the wedding day, the post-wedding, but what about the other days? These are costs that do tend to fall to couples eventually, so whether you want to put on breakfast for everyone, you want to have some catered events on other evenings, you want to do a supermarket shop or a drink shop so that you've got food there for everybody, this all should be in your budget as well. I see couples on average spending, let's say, between 1,000 and 2,000 euro on this extra catering. And all the costs that I've given there are without tax. So tax in Italy works in 2 ways. There's either 10% tax or 22% tax. It's too complicated now to go through which one applies to which, but it's worth just putting this budget together and slapping on 10%, just so you know that tax is likely going to apply to most of those costs and you've got it factored in. I've put together a draft budget just for you based on the cost that I've just gone through, and it will be in the comments below. Do yourself a favour, take a look at this and you can change the figures and play around with it. There are things in there that you may or may not want to have for your wedding, but it's just a really good idea and a place to start with the costs that I've just gone through. One area that I neglected to talk about was decor. When I'm making budgets for my couples, the first time I ever speak to them, I always put in about 7,000 or 8,000 euro for decor. And this seems like an awful lot of money for decor to some people, but it's not. If you think that very quickly you'll spend 1,000 euro on lighting over your dinner, 1,000 euro on a dance floor and some lighting over that, 300 plus euro on bridal party flowers, then arch of flowers or some sort of decoration around the altar can cost you up to 1,000 euro. All of this really quickly adds up, and if you haven't put aside enough money at the start to cover some decor, it can be really disappointing. Usually you come to decor towards the end of your planning, and if there's not enough money there to do anything, it can be really upsetting. So it's worth just putting aside a sensible, realistic amount up front. So there we are. If you're working to a budget of around 40 or 50,000 euro, which is so much money and used to go such a long way in Italy, it's probably just about going to cover a decent Italian wedding these days with all of the elements that I've gone through. You may have to make some tough decisions about where your money goes, and my rule on this is always just to do less things but do them really well. It's better to do a few things well than try and do everything and really push down the quality of it. If you do that, it can also lead to quite a lot of stress. So as I said, there's a link below to the budget draft that I've done for you, and on Lista.com there's loads of other tools and advice to help you in how to plan your budgets and your Italian wedding. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next week.